We've had several conversations on this podcast about the conditioning, and I've been thinking about planning life and how to move forward. And it really occurs to me that we were heavily conditioned not to live in the moment, but to always be chasing something else. So you have to get good grades in elementary to get to a good middle school, and then to get to a good high school. And of course, you have to work really hard in high school to get to a good university. And then you have to get good grades in university, or get to a good university to get a good job, or to go to good grad school. And then at that job, we were constantly taught to chase the next title, the next promotion, the next level of power, the next salary.
I remember in school that they would threaten that if we made a misstep at any point along the way, that it would be on our permanent record. The permanent record, which I found out later in life is just not a thing. Nobody in my adult life has ever cared one bit about what was on my permanent record in second grade.
You're really lucky.
I am lucky? What was on your permanent record that followed you?
We're all lucky that our second grade grades didn't follow us. I don't remember ever feeling satisfied with where I was. I was always working toward the next thing. The first time I sort of sat still and realized I can live in this moment and be really happy in this moment without thinking about what I need to do to get to the next step, when my daughter was born. So that was a huge gift to me, that she taught me to live in the moment. We spent so much time in the park, which honestly is not really productive time. And I realized not having productive time in the park was amazing and necessary and healthy for me and for her.
And in one real sense, it was very productive. It just wasn't producing
right
for the world. It was productive in that it cemented a relationship that you had with her, and it was helping her to gain skills that she was going to need later in life. And so all of those good things, they're just not as measurable, or we tend not to measure those kinds of things. But even that non-productive time was at least useful, even if it wasn't producing.
It was useful and healthy. There's another stark example I have of how my view of the world was always next, or always trying to do something else. And that is, I've had a video game buddy for most of my adult life. And when free range video games, when you could just explore the world, and then you have some missions to do, but you could just explore the world. You could take that car, you can go visit this building, whatever. When those video games came out, we had a very different approach to how we liked those games. So this friend of mine liked to run around and try to find things and see what's under that bridge. It would drive me crazy. Like, you're not advancing toward 100%. What are you doing? You're wasting so much time looking under that bridge. Go get the mission. Go get the whatever. And I realize now, looking back, it was a conditioning that I had, that we had to be moving toward 100%, or we're not, or we're wasting time. And I don't live like that anymore.
I had a class in high school. It was calculus, and way back when, calculus was like the AP class that you could get into. It was the highest class that you could get into. I mean, now they're doing calculus in like 5th grade. I don't know. It's crazy. But we had to take finals. And the agreement was, in our senior year, that if taking the final was not going to affect your final grade, you could just skip taking the final altogether.
Yes,
because if passing or failing wasn't going to do anything for you. I was getting a B+, or A- maybe even. I was getting a B+ in calculus, and I had determined for myself that I didn't need the A. I was good. The final wasn't going to help me. I would have had to get so much on this final. It would be just stupid. My friends figured out that, because they don't want to take the final without me. My friends figured out that if I got 102% on this final, I could bring my grade up to an A. And every final had extra credit option. So 102% was doable. So they made me study for this ding-dang test. And I'll be damned if I didn't get 102% and raise my grade up to an A-.
Okay, that's productive.
It is, but I could have said no, A+ is fine. And I was happy believing that the final wouldn't affect my grade. But when they did the math and figured that it was actually attainable, then that conditioning set in. And I was like, yes, please, if I can get that A. And you know how much I had to study at that point
Mm-hmm.
to catch up on all the study I wasn't doing because I didn't think I was going to have to take it.
But that's conditioning in the
Crazy.
form of peer pressure. It's the same thing.
It was only because they didn't want to take it by themselves.
It wasn't your best interest.
Like misery loves company kind of a thing. They
Right.
didn't care what my grade was. They just didn't want me sitting it out.
Good for you for getting that. I think this idea of constantly trying to go for whatever's next is tied so tightly to achievement, because I can remember looking back, one of my favorite things ever was when I was a brownie and a Girl Scout. So we're talking 5 to 10 years old. I loved the Girl Scout badges. I loved them because they had tasks. I'll check off A, B, C, D, and some of them were quite complicated, like camping, things like that. I loved checking off those boxes, getting that badge, putting it on my sash. I loved that achievement that's marked in that way.
So I am all grown up now, and I still like getting shiny badges for my achievements. So I have to confess this. So I walk every day, and walking can be incredibly boring after a really period of time walking. And so I found that there are several companies where you can join the race virtually, and then you can take the time that you need to finish the race. And then when you finish the race, and it tracks your steps on your phone or your smartwatch, and when you finish the race, they will automatically then send you the medal for having accomplished that race. So I have been racking up medals over the last year or so, and all of the races are from 6 to over 100, several hundreds of miles, and so they're not all intended for you to do them all at once. In fact, if you ask me, a 6.2 mile race is also not really one that you are intended to complete all at once. But they just came out with an Earth Day medal that's 6.2 miles. Earth Day is April 22nd. And I figured out that I have already been walking on my long walks. I've walked 5 miles. And I thought I could do a 6. And so, because the shiny medals that I have hanging still don't feel like enough of accomplishment, I'm going to, on April 22nd, which is Earth Day, I'm going to do a 6.2 mile all at once and earn that medal.
Okay,
in one go.
Good on you. That's amazing. I will applaud you the whole way before, the whole way after. And B, it's funny how we were so conditioned to have this achievement, this next thing, this higher degree, the higher title, that we still seek out those shiny medals.
I do love having some record of having accomplished a thing.
I
still do.
Is that healthy? Because it motivates us. It keeps you walking, and that's really healthy.
I think that it's incredibly healthy as long as the chasing doesn't become the only thing.
Right, you do other things with your life.
Yes, and so for me, even on my walks, even though I am looking forward to getting that medal, I also spend a lot of those walks doing podcasts and audiobooks and learning Spanish and just spending other time being in that moment. I used to listen to music all the time, and that was incredibly boring. So now I'm actually racking up achievements both mentally and physically at the same time. So I guess that's not really a great example because I am still seeking an achievement. But my point is that I do actually enjoy the walk itself. The walk itself doesn't become a means to an end. It's not that I'm walking so that I can achieve a medal. I walk because it makes me feel good, and it's alone time, and sometimes it's time when I do just listen to music, and other times it's time that I, spend learning things about the world. But I think the problem comes when the chasing becomes the only thing and the attaining of the thing ceases to be satisfying in any kind of positive way.
I think you're really getting somewhere. I was going to suggest that we dig deeper on what is the differentiator, because we're making the case that constantly chasing the next thing isn't necessarily healthy, but I think getting Girl Scout badges, super healthy. I think getting the badges for walking, super healthy. What is the main differentiator between the healthy, the conditioned unhealthy chasing of always the next thing and not being satisfied with that next thing, versus saying, you know what, I did a great job and I'm going to put this shiny thing right next to my other shiny things, because that's great. So what are some of the other differentiators between the healthy and the unhealthy constant chase?
So this brings me to a conversation about what I think a midlife crisis is. And this, I think, is the crux of the problem. And then I guess let's dig into what a solution to the problem could be. So I think because we have been so conditioned to always be chasing the next thing, that I think that when we hit midlife, I think one of two things happens. We either look ahead and realize that we're halfway there and we haven't accomplished a tenth of the things that we said we wanted to set out to accomplish, and this realization that we probably never will, I think, is one of the things that spirals us into this depression of a midlife crisis. The other thing that can happen is that you actually do achieve all of the things, and now you still have half your life ahead of you, and the thing that you've achieved doesn't seem to be satisfying, and you want to just keep going out and achieving more and more and more and more. So I have long since thought that what a midlife crisis essentially is coming to the logical conclusion of always chasing, which is that it's never going to satisfy when the chase is itself the only goal.
I would put myself in the latter category of having achieved what I thought I wanted, and it was really unsatisfying. So I wanted an advanced degree. I got my PhD. Actually, I was very happy with that. That was very satisfying, but it really is kind of a once in a lifetime thing. It's not something I would go and get another PhD. I wouldn't do that to myself. But that was very satisfying. But in my career, I started as sort of an entry-level professional with a PhD, and all I wanted at that point was to become a director. And there's a very prescribed career path in my industry. I just wanted to be a director. And then several years in, I got that director title, and I thought, this is amazing. Within a week, I needed to be a VP. It wasn't, that director was not enough once I got it. It was not enough. Celebrated for a day, then I needed the VP title. And then a couple more years, and I got the VP title. And those years as the VP were the most miserable ever. And I think it was that weird juxtaposition of, I've gotten this, and it's not what I really wanted out of life. It wasn't a healthy place for me to be anyway. But there wasn't any kind of feeling of being at the pinnacle and feeling like, you know what, I did this and I'm satisfied with myself. I didn't have that satisfaction, and that's what bothered me. It wasn't so much that I wanted to go for the next thing, because I really didn't know whether I wanted to continue to strive for something as opposed to just doing something else with my life. I didn't want to strive for further because I knew that it wasn't going to satisfy me.
So that's really interesting, because some of the things that you achieved were really satisfying, and then other things that you achieved were not as satisfying. And maybe that's part of the equation that we're talking about here, is determining which things we're chasing because the chase itself is satisfying, and then the accomplishing of the goal is just like a cherry on top for having done it. But maybe some of those other things, it felt like a natural progression, but maybe wasn't something you ever really truly wanted, or it didn't live up to the dream of what you thought it would be. And at that point, maybe you were only chasing the goal and not enjoying the process of getting there.
For sure. I remember very distinctly, I just want that title. I don't care what pathway I have to take to get there. I want the title. And then when I got the title, I'm like, you know, this isn't enhancing my life in any way, and it's not helping me to have better contribution to patient care or healthcare equity or any kind of more noble goal. And I realized I've been chasing this for a very long time, and it's not what I actually wanted. And that was very disappointing.
When you very first set out to get that directorship, were you enjoying the process of getting there?
Yes. Yes.
And did you find meaning and purpose in the efforts you were putting in?
I did.
So then maybe the jumping off point is when you jumped off from, you're doing this because you love to do it, to I'm doing it because I can get something for it, that it suddenly became not all that and more.
Right. And I'll get something that I don't really understand yet until I have it. And then I didn't really want it.
Did you find that you had to sacrifice some integrity to get there?
I left my last VP job because my integrity was being eroded. That's exactly why I left.
I think that's a huge piece of why those things aren't always satisfying. And I think there comes a time when you hit that pinnacle of for yourself, and then the only way to achieve the next big pinnacles is to erode some of your own sense of self and integrity to get there. And I think this is clearly what has happened with the billionaire class. They have attained so much, so much, so much, so much that it's become no longer satisfying. And a lot of them have had to completely lose their humanity in order to get there. I don't see how you get there to that point without losing your humanity. So I sometimes wonder if maybe that's part of what's going on with us too, even on a much smaller scale, is that trying to achieve a thing, that the trying to achieve it is the thing. And then finally achieving it is just affirmation that you're already on the right path. And then having to step off that to do something even more that maybe really isn't a goal of yours is starting to veer you away from your core mission.
I think that's it, that it's not really a goal of ours. And I think there's some component of we get so busy and we have our head down running that race to try to get to that next step that we don't ever stop to think, is that next step? Well, what is that next step that I want in my life? What are my values? What do I want my life to look like? We just say, this is the thing that's being offered. I'm going to go chase that thing. And maybe that thing is not what we want. I'm very, the way that I look back on my experience in corporate America is that the closer I got to the C-suite, the closer and closer I got to it, the dirtier it felt. And I did not like that.
Yeah.
Sorry to all my lovely people who I really care for. It's not all of you. It's the system that we're working in.
So I suppose there's some value in recognizing that there might be a limit to achievement beyond which we no longer have satisfaction, life satisfaction. And maybe coming to an awareness about what it is that we really do value, what we see as our own personal mission and purpose, and where we belong in the world. That sometimes we have to let go of shiny achievements in order to continue to live what is really truly our core value.
We have to take the time to look at that core value. So I'm in a mode right now with my company where I'm hiring a bunch of people, whatever. And when I'm talking to these new people, I've been talking to many, many people, and I always ask them many questions, but at least these two. One is, what values do you hold dear? And that's usually quite educational for me, because I learn a lot about whether they've thought through what their values are, or whether they haven't really, or whether they sort of spit back the values that they think that I hold dear. The second question I ask is, what do you want your life to look like? Because that's another thing people have to stop and think about. My life will look like this because I have to have a job and I have to pay these bills and I have to send my kids to college. Those are the requirements. But what do you want your life to look like? Have you thought, if I had an ideal world with all the money and there was no issue of, the complications around my life, what would I want my life to look like? How much time do I want to spend working? How much time do I want to spend playing? What are my hobbies? Where do I want to walk for these medals, right? These are things that people have to stop and take a concerted effort to look at.
I don't think that we give ourselves the time to even ask that question when we are on the rat race to chasing.
Right.
And I think it's a really valuable question.
So there are different levels of figuring out what you want your life to look like. So everyone has to eat. Everyone has to live somewhere. Mm-hmm. So those kinds of basic fundamental questions young people have to ask themselves. But I think there are some sort of canned answers to that. I need to get a job, or I need to do this, or I need to become an artist or a social media influencer, or whatever the answer is. There has to be some sort of fundamental, how are you going to survive in this planet? What I'm talking about is much more, what do you want to give to this planet? How do you want to show up in the world? How do you want to show up for yourself? What do you want to see in the mirror at the end of the day? And I honestly didn't start asking those questions till my late 40s.
Right at about the same time as you were starting to lose your integrity and it was starting to hurt a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
So maybe we can let some of the younger people off the hook if they haven't started to ask those questions of themselves.
I think asking how am I going to survive, that's a fair question to expect a 20 something to evaluate. But the what do I want to do with
Yes.
the world? That's a later in life. I don't think they know enough, honestly, to take time to figure those questions out.
I don't even think that we should have those all worked out either. I think that the getting to that midlife where you realize that the chasing isn't going to get you that satisfaction, I think is the beginning of the rest of our lives when we get to then process that question. And I, for one, hope that I never get to a place where I'm just so completely satisfied with everything that's happening in my life that there's no more growth, no more learning, no more ambition. Ambition is one of my values. It really is, but not at the expense of other things. I happen to be at a place in my life right now where everything is perfect as far as the way that I've set my life up, the people who I have in my life, the physical environment that I'm in, the things that I spend my time doing throughout the day. And I kind of don't want it to change. And at the same time, I know that it's going to change because nothing ever stays the same. And so there is still also a part of me that is looking forward to whatever is that next thing. Because part of what makes my life so full right now is being a full-time caregiver for several people. That's not going to last forever. And at some point, those people are no longer going to need me in this capacity. And then I'm going to be free, in a sense, to discover some other things that I love to do with myself and with my time. And so even though right now on paper my life is perfect and I'm very, very happy, part of the reason is because I'm allowing myself this moment in time to just enjoy it. To just enjoy it. And so I'm always thinking a little bit ahead, like, okay, so then what's the next thing? And starting to dabble in some other learnings and, oh, I might like to learn a little bit about this, and I'd like to learn a language, and I'd like to do some other things. But those things aren't me chasing as much as they are just experiencing in a completely new way.
I like the way you phrase that. I use the word with my kids, drinking in life. And that is having an experience just for the sake of having that experience. Saying yes to things, not because you want something out of it or because it will bring you closer to some goal, but just because you want that experience. Skydiving, for example, learning a new language. Those are all just drinking in life. Bringing in a whole wrench to the conversation. Here we go. More seatbelt time.
Okay.
Are we also conditioned when our life gets to a place of calm and peace and it's working? Are we conditioned to throw in a little bit of a bomb and chaos? Even if that chaos is good, are we conditioned for that? Are you relating to and engaging with this content? Do you have a friend you think might enjoy it as well? Please invite them to listen. Are we conditioned to throw in a little bit of a bomb and chaos? Even if that chaos is good, are we conditioned for that? When my daughter was 8 years old, things were working. I had a nice job. I got my travel figured out. She had a good caregiver. My mom and dad were around taking care of her when I traveled, and we traveled together sometimes. Everything was working really well. And then I went and got another kid on purpose. Just a little bomb of chaos. And honestly, that was the best chaos I possibly could have asked for. I wouldn't do it any other way. But I couldn't just enjoy the peace.
You're not going to like my answer.
Wait, let me mute
That
you. Go for it.
that wanting to add chaos because life is too calm when it's peaceful is a trauma response to complex PTSD.
And I will take off the table the fact that I brought my son in as chaos because that was absolutely the best decision. One of the top 2 decisions I've made in my life. So that I won't count that as a trauma response. But there are many other instances of me adding chaos to my life when I didn't need to.
Just because it's chaos doesn't mean that it's the wrong choice or that it's a bad decision or that you shouldn't have done that. When we grow up in CPTSD, our brains are sort of stuck in a fight or flight mode. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We're stuck in that mode. And once we get out of that mode, our bodies don't know what to do with all of that. We don't know how to process that peace and that calm. And so a lot of us, conditioning, yeah, I would say a little bit. A lot of us seek to add more chaos because that peace and calm is really unsettling. That place where we feel like everything is perfect on paper, if it's really, really unsettling, then there probably is something back there that is making that uncomfortable. I had that a lot when I was a kid. Most of my young adult life, I did throw bombs, and they weren't the good ones. They weren't the good ones. I would throw bombs into everything because I could not process not living in chaos. And so for me, it would be like, hey, we've got 3 kids and my life is crazy. Let's get a dog.
Yes.
Just throw a little something else in there, right? Or
Yeah.
like, I'm working my tail to the bone, so I'm gonna go get another degree. Just those kinds of bombs. And they didn't all turn out badly. I loved all the dogs we ever had. I love that I accomplished an additional degree. But what got me there was just not being able to be okay in the peace. And I lived in that chaos for 50 years. And it wasn't until I left a chaotic marriage that I had to learn how to sit comfortably in that peaceful place. And it took a long time. It took a long time for my body to re-regulate, or to regulate probably for the first time in my life, to where when things were peaceful, I could just enjoy it. And it took a lot of therapy, and it took a lot of time, and it took a lot of intention. And I think maybe that's part of what we don't get, what we don't allow ourselves, is that time and space to be uncomfortable and to learn a new way, to learn to stop chasing for the sake of chasing or for the sake of an achievement, and learn instead that the process of doing is itself the shiny thing.
So let me point out that your advice was right now to learn how to be uncomfortable in the peace.
Yes. Yes.
What's wrong with that?
You got to do that. You got to do that. And that's, so I think that a lot of people who we would look and we go, why do you self-sabotage? I can tell you exactly why. It's because that place of peace is really, really uncomfortable if you didn't grow up with it. If you haven't had it for a really long time, it's very hard for your body. And the interesting thing too is that my body processed that peace and calm as boredom. And so for a lot of those early months when there was no chaos, but I was also just too physically exhausted to go seek new chaos, I was like, oh my God, my life is so boring. It wasn't boredom. It was my body re-regulating to the stasis, to that calm place where I think most of us probably would live happily if we could learn how not to be scared of it.
But we'd have to be not scared of it. We'd have to break the conditioning that we always need to do more, achieve more, get more medals, get more titles, get more degrees. We have to let all of that go.
You also have to remove yourself from environments that you might still be in that require that constant chaos in order to keep up.
Of course. Of course. I think that's step A. Recognize it and get out of that environment. I wasn't in too many of those environments sometimes, but as an adult, not so much.
I would be willing to bet that your work environment held just a skosh of that toxicity that kept you seeking the chaos, because without it, it would feel unsettling.
The minute I said that thought came into my head, that the chaotic environment I was in was capitalism, corporate America.
Mm-hmm. Not just corporate America, pharmaceutical corporate America.
Right. There are so many layers, because in the pharmaceutical industry, we're actually doing good for people, and therefore we need to sacrifice all of ourselves and not be there for our kid's birthday because we're helping patients, right? So there's this layered chaos.
So when we talk about capitalism, we will have to discuss that again, because the mission is only in part the mission.
Right.
Part of the mission is to get you to believe in the mission so that you can then line the pockets of the people at the top.
Yep, exactly.
So now you're out of that environment, and the chaos, I'm going to put this in quotes. I'm going to put this in air quotes. The chaos that's in your life doesn't feel as unhealthily chaotic as it felt for me for you a few years ago.
You're right. I completely agree. I really like where my life is right now. I would love to explore the I would love to explore the connection between being uncomfortable sitting in that calm and self-sabotage. I think there are multiple motivations for self-sabotage, but maybe some of that sabotage is because we're not comfortable in that peace and we need to get a new dog or get a new degree or something that might not be us chasing something we want, but would be self-sabotage of that calm and that peace.
I mean, I think you just named it. I think a lot of self-sabotage is because we aren't comfortable in that peaceful place. And we probably don't even realize it. I don't think that most people who self-sabotage really, really at the core want lives to be harder.
No, I
I
would
don't really
agree.
think we want that, but we don't know how else to exist without that constant chasing of the chaos. And it's when I talk about chaos, for me, the way that that manifests is just constant busyness, constant noise. I used to not sit in silence very well, had to always have music on. I kind of still do, but I can be in silence for a while now. Um, but it's that kind of always a little bit overstimulated. And so if my body would regulate down to where there wasn't enough stimuli, that's when a self-sabotage bomb would I would drop right in there.
Interesting. I distinctly remember months before I did my PhD thesis defense, so near where I was finishing my PhD, my advisor would say, "Okay, you're a PhD candidate, and your C is closing down to a D, and you're going to have a PhD." And I think that scared me because I had been working. It's not easy to get a PhD, it's just not. And it was lean years. I had no money. I was busy all the time. I was constantly at school. It's hard. And near the end, about that time, I couldn't picture what life would look like. What if I actually did get the PhD? Then what? Like that what's going to happen at that point? What do I have to do? What you know, what's I couldn't picture that. And I remember distinctly, like a month before I was going to graduate, calling mom on the phone, and I was bawling, and I said, "Is it too late to drop out?" And I don't even remember what the problem was, but I was thinking of putting a bomb on that because I couldn't picture what it would look like to succeed and have that achievement and that peace.
That's a really good point. Fear of success is, I think, also a part of the whole equation. That I used to be so scared to fail and almost as scared to succeed, which doesn't really put you in a good position.
Right, right.
Because you're either going to fail or you're going to succeed. If you're afraid of both, you're just going to live in fear all the time.
So we have both succeeded in our path. Just let me put that on the table.
Yeah. And the more I did succeed and survived it, the more I was able to then succeed in other areas and just enjoy it. And the more I practiced succeeding at things, the more comfortable I became in enjoying the process of getting there. I think a few of those very early ones that we have, graduating high school, getting a driver's license, graduating college, starting a family, maybe getting married, all of those things are terrifying because then what? Because then what? And then you start doing those things and then you realize that, like, okay, I'm not going to use marriage. I was going to use marriage and talk about how, like, the engagement itself is the fun part and the marriage is like meh. But I don't think I want to quite use that one as my example. You know what I'm talking about.
I had some things to say about marriage if you were going to go down that road, but yeah, let's use a different example.
So I also went for a higher degree. Nowhere near as challenging as a PhD. I got a doctor of ministry in biblical preaching. So becoming a pastor, you have to get a master's degree, a master of divinity, and then you can become a pastor. And then if you want to keep chasing a higher education, you can go for a doctorate. And when I was going for that, it was one of the first times that I really just truly loved the process. And I was very much looking forward to having that degree in my hand. But the process was so fulfilling and so satisfying. My degree was Doctor of Ministry in Biblical Preaching, which meant that I got to spend all my time learning more things about the Bible, which I know for normies probably sounds like a nightmare. But I had learned to fall in love with the stories, and it was the storytelling. It wasn't for me like well, if I just get everything just so, then my life is going to be perfect because I'll have all the formulas. It wasn't that at all. It was listening to the stories of people who lived thousands of years ago and going like, yeah, I can totally see myself in that story. And what that really did for me was it made me fall in love with storytelling and the idea of telling my story and the idea of learning other people's stories. The process of getting that degree and even the work that I had to do to get the final thesis written and accomplished, the process itself was so fulfilling that when I got the degree, it was incredibly satisfying because I had enjoyed the steps along the way.
I think that's a big differentiator because you enjoy walking too, and you enjoy getting that recognition of how far you've walked and to record it. So enjoying the process, that's a big clue that we're not chasing and that we're actually just achieving.
So how do we get there from a childhood that has conditioned most of us to chase as the goal? How do we then move from that chase to enjoying the process?
I think, ironically, we need to stop what we're doing and take a minute, even a quick beat, to think about our values and to think about what we want out of our lives. And we're not conditioned to do that because that's not productive time. It's not going to get you the next title or the higher pay. But if we don't do that, we could end up chasing things that aren't good for us or that aren't even real. They don't give you that satisfaction.
Just like everything that is worth attaining, it is practice. It just takes practice. Every other podcast that we record, I talk about practicing the little things, practicing what you want to achieve. And so, for me, the whole process of getting my doctoral degree was exactly the right amount of time. It was a 3-year program, and it was not so long I couldn't get it, but it was long enough that I actually could do the small attainable steps. And every time I got a little step done, I could just really enjoy that. I think that we have to start somewhere. I think maybe pruning is one of the really critical pieces of this. Because when we're in that state of constant chaos, I'll speak for myself, when I was in a state of constant chaos, I had no room to do any reflection. And it was intentional. I didn't want to reflect because I didn't really want to know the answers to the hard questions. And I didn't really want to have to even ask myself the hard questions. But when I started pruning things out of my life that were chaos and doing the actual internal work of saying, okay, every piece of me right now wants to add a fucking bird to my household, to say, I don't need that chaos right now, and thinking through those questions like, okay, I can see it coming. I know what it is. It's me seeking more chaos. Why? And what will happen if I don't? What will happen if I don't add that chaos? And then what happens when I start to eliminate other pieces of chaos, when a pet dies and I don't replace them, or when, yeah, it's just saying. I remember having those conversations like, okay, when are we done getting new animals? Right? Because at some point, I need to be done losing animals.
Right, and your kids
right?
are grown up and you want to travel.
Yeah.
You wanted to travel.
So I think starting with just an awareness of that sometimes the chaos we build into our lives is intentional and it serves a purpose, but it's not going to serve a purpose forever. And so we have to start thinking through, what purpose is this chaos serving? And is it time to let some of it go? And is it time to start pulling back on some of those things that are really not serving us anymore? And then what do we replace that with so that we can practice the art of being comfortable in the silence and the peace?
One complication of coming to the recognition that we're putting chaos in our own lives for a reason, and that maybe we don't have to do that, is that sometimes the chaos is already there. Sometimes she's already pregnant. Sometimes the dog's already, you got this puppy in a box. What are you going to do about it? You're not going to not proceed with that. I think that we have to look at other ways besides the things that are already dropped, all the bombs that are already dropped. We need to look at other things that aren't already dropped and try to avoid those bombs in the future.
That's a good point. Yeah, I don't think I was suggesting that if you're already pregnant that you should get an abortion so that you don't have that chaos. That was not at all what I was saying. Like, oh, that's a little too much chaos, done. No, that's not what I was saying. But I agree. Your point, I take your point, which is that sometimes the chaos is already there and then you have to deal with it. I think there are very few things, though, that we add to our life for the purpose of chaos that we can't either undo, or if it's something we can't undo, like a child in our life, which is a blessing and it's chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have to learn how to manage other pieces of the life so that that chaos is contained to the thing that's really important, which is having that relationship with that child.
Absolutely.
Or whatever the thing is. So, yeah, there's things you can't just eliminate. You can't just run away from everything. And I don't think that's exactly what I'm saying. But no. I think that we can start to learn to manage the additional chaos that we're tempted to put in. And then also start to unwind some of the things that we have created for ourselves that are chaos that really don't need to be there.
Right. If we're in an unhealthy work environment, or putting our kids in too many activities, or being in an unhealthy relationship, I think those are all things we could work on that we could unwind.
And sometimes we think we're stuck in those things.
Of course.
We're not always stuck in those things. There might be some real logistics that have to happen. There might take some planning and it might take some time, but there are very few things, even including relationships, marriages, careers, houses that we've bought. Those things can be unwound. Sometimes living those chaotic lives, especially when we're talking about children, man, you talk to any empty nester and they will say they would gladly get one day of that chaos back.
Right. I love the chaos of kids.
Yeah. So there's good healthy chaos, and then there's like, you really need to cut that out chaos.
The true self-sabotage chaos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're very different. Those are very different things. And even a pet. Like, I'm not saying don't get a pet. I have a little puppy. He's a year old, so clearly I decided within the last year to add another puppy to my life. But I also thought it through, and I had such a lack of uncontrolled chaos that adding a little dog in was not going to change that dramatically.
So he's little okay. He's little chaos, and he makes sure you go on a walk every single day, and that's really good for you.
He's really, really good for me. Yes. So please don't hear me say, you shouldn't have kids, you shouldn't have pets, you should. No, what I'm saying is, when you feel that desire to add more chaos to an already chaotic life, just take a beat and think it through. That's what I'm saying.
I think all we're saying today in general is take a beat, think it through. What are your values? What do you want out of life? Mm-hmm. And to really, I was talking to someone today, I was mentoring her. She wanted to have my job right now, and I was discussing all the decisions she had to make. And I said, take a piece of paper, like actually write your values down and prioritize them, because thinking about it is good, but until you see it on paper or see it on a computer, it's really hard to say, I have these two values. And looking at it and thinking about it now, I can say one is really much more important than the other. And we don't take enough time. I think we're afraid to do that. I'm afraid to do that sometimes. But it's so important. All right, so I'm giving every single person who's listening here, I'm giving you 32 minutes. 32. Take 32 minutes, do nothing else but to think about your life. I'm giving you permission. It's a gift.
And if all you can manage is 3, take the 3.
There you go.
Because 32 might feel like a lot for some people who aren't used to the quiet and the silence.
So do it over the period of 2 weeks then.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I love that.
It's not an assignment, it's permission.
Permission. Yes, exactly. Permission. Yes, and permission to stop chasing, slow down, enjoy the process, be intentional about your life, because you only get the one. Coming soon on Super Random Things with those sisters. How much can we expect of other people? And let me just give a little bit of background as to what I'm talking about. So there's two sides of this story for me. One is that I am of the opinion that if I'm expecting things of people that they're not capable of giving, then my expectations are too high. So I've sort of trained myself to just let people be, let people do their own thing, and not expect too much of them. And then I heard a TikTok from a coach that was saying, if you consider yourself low maintenance, it's not because you're super chill or easygoing. It's because you've been conditioned to expect less.
I think,
And so I really am struggling with the question of how much can we expect of other people? Like, where does that, anyway, that's my question. Where does that go?
I see big bites in that one. One of them is setting expectations. Can we expect things of other people who just cannot, will not, refuse to meet those expectations? That's the first thing. So is it a pathology that they can't meet the expectation, or are they just not wanting to be in a relationship with us the way we want? Number two is setting our own boundaries. And that is, what do we do if someone fails to meet our expectations for whatever reason? Where are our own boundaries on that?
So let's talk about that. I have some friends who complain about the things that people in their lives do that are just frustrating, expectations that they have for those people that those are not being met. And as we all do, and this is what girlfriends are for. This is why we have girlfriends, so that we can get on the phone and bitch about the people who are not rising to our expectations. And at the same time, I sometimes want to say, but if you keep expecting them to do the same thing and they consistently fail to provide that, at some point you have to stop expecting it, because they've been very, very clear that they are not going to provide that for you.
So let's go a little bit meta and say, are you expecting more from your friends than is reasonable to expect? You're expecting them to have the strength
Yes.
to either stop complaining about it or to do something about it. And maybe that expectation is not realistic and certainly not being met.
Damn, I think you're right. I think yes, because I want them to move into a place where that doesn't bother them so much. And it bothers me so much that it bothers them so much. So yeah.
Well, who's being
Point well
bothered? Who's being
taken.
bothered more at this point?
Well, they're being bothered more. I usually just let it go, because I've tried to point out the realities that they're living in, and they don't want to hear it. So it's like, I'm just going to stop doing that, because it's not what it's not what they come to me for. They come to me to have a sounding board to be like, what? And I'm perfectly happy to be that person.
You are you?
What?
Are you happy to be that person? Because you're not happy talking about this. I mean, you're you know, I don't feel like this is a happy conversation that you're having about how much you're suffering for your friend.
Okay, if I'm being really completely, totally honest about it, the problem isn't as much that I'm suffering for my friend. The problem is that them not having moved past it triggers how many years I didn't move past it in my own relationship.
I think we have a winner.
Our puppies would really love if you would like and subscribe to the content. If you like it, look at those faces.
Look at the faces. Thank you.